Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever and wherever you are. This is Ben McLeish of the Zeitgeist Movement UK, and welcome to our podcast, which at the moment is weekly, where we discuss the true trends towards sustainability and the next generation of global society as we get closer and closer to existential risk, resource depletion, and all kinds of other threats to the ecosphere and the biosphere in general, including, of course, humanity itself. We try to be upbeat about this, and we try to offer the positive solutions that science and technology offers, coupled with a growing social realization of how one needs to be positioned in one's attitude towards the environment and human society and everything that means with respect to social cohesion, which is presently ignored by the society that we have around us, which is very much predicated on ownership and division and those age-old models that exist from before we actually had a global view, when we were only village-based and when our frame of reference was much, much smaller and therefore led us to false conclusions about how to really live on this planet. Normally we do take a macro view and we try and discuss very large issues, but this week we're going to go down to the smaller level and going to welcome on, actually for the first time, I've checked our archives, Douglas Mallette, who is a former NASA subcontractor and a systems engineer for the Space Shuttle program. Members of our movement will know him very well because he's spoken many times, all over the world in fact, on what it means to have a scientific worldview. He's the author, or I suppose the director, of a film called Awakenings and Our Technical Reality, which emerged very early on in the movement's history. And he has, over the last couple of years, started formulating his own company. Now, the Zeitgeist Movement itself doesn't necessarily put its weight behind the formation of companies, but individual projects do exist that members go and do themselves. In Toronto, we have a tool library that was founded by one of our members who's also been on the radio show before. That doesn't mean that the Zeitgeist Movement is a tool library. And similarly, Douglas's efforts to found a company that uses something called aquaponics, something that Douglas will explain in a moment after I've played the introductory video and then welcome him on the show, is trying to essentially produce the next generation of farming, decentralized, vertical, space-saving forms of agriculture that don't rely so much on pesticides and the oil industry and the very, very outdated 19th century and 18th century linear way of farming, of taking up vast amounts of space on land, and how this is to be implemented, how it works, and how he has found trying to push his effort for this kind of global food production out that would use less resources, that would be localized, that could actually be deployed inside cities that already exist in a way that traditional farming simply, of course, cannot. It has to be driven in at great resource expense and at time delay, and which, of course, demands supply chain economics as well. So without further ado, I will now play Douglas's video, which is on Thunderclap. If you want to support this campaign, we mention it in the show as well. There's actually a Thunderclap link in the show notes. It's a free effort at social outreach, and expires on April the 11th. So if you want to do this, all you have to do is a very simple sign-up that uses Facebook or Tumblr or Twitter. It doesn't cost any money, and it doesn't really cost any effort either. I've already done it. And if you think it's a worthwhile project, if you review it and see it and understand it and think that this should be something that we should be following, that should be promoted to grow past our very wasteful, outdated agricultural practices, then throw your weight behind it. And now for Douglas's video.
Hello and welcome to the 21st century. We have communication devices, the likes of which Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, never dreamed of. We have 3D printing systems that are going to revolutionize manufacturing. We're developing robot cars that can eliminate human error, which is great because we're an easily distracted species. We have all these amazing advances, yet we're still fighting one of the most basic problems you can think of: hunger. Really? Hunger? Now, of course, we could talk food waste, and wow, do we waste a lot of food. Or we could talk about how shipping food halfway around the world is kind of ridiculous. Talk about a carbon footprint. But to be honest, I'm tired of talking about the problem. Every year, hundreds of millions of dollars are dumped into improving food security, and every year we still seem to have the same problems. One of the most commonly used social definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Don't you think it's about time we do something completely different? It's time to stop trying to fit square pegs into round holes. That is what Cybernated Farm Systems, CFS, is all about. I started this company with the intent of helping to shift the agricultural paradigm, and it is shifting. From organic farming to permaculture to vertical gardens, the world is starting to figure out that there are better ways to grow food without drowning the plants and soil in all kinds of nasty chemicals. And better still, the idea of local production and local distribution is catching on. Knowing your food is kind of a big deal. And this is what CFS plans to deliver: sustainable, highly automated aquaponic farm facilities that do not depend on an existing infrastructure. Additionally, CFS has a core philosophy called SusPlus, Sustainability Plus. SusPlus is the idea of going past do no harm to give something back. For example, besides growing food, a CFS building will include a composting system. It'll be able to clean local polluted water bodies. And any surplus power can be used by the people for things like powering lights or charging cell phones. We would be honored if SusPlus became a global industry standard, which is why the concept and logo for SusPlus are freely available for all to download and use. This is the age of social networking and the uninhibited flow of knowledge and ideas. And you know what? CFS would love to have millions of groupies. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Visit the CFS website and register so you can get insider information on our progress. Help us show the world that there are amazing solutions out there. This is the 21st century, and it can be pretty awesome if we want it to be. Thank you.
So, Douglas, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on. I only just realized in the entire history of this show, I don't think we've actually had you on. Is that the case?
I think I've been on once before. You know what? I don't even remember, because I do a lot of V-radio and I've done other shows similar in scope, so I really don't remember.
Excellent. Well, apologies in advance if we haven't had you on enough. Let's put it that way.
I'm not that special.
We have just played the audio of a video that was recently used for a Thunderclap social broadcast campaign to promote your Cybernated Farm Systems, to get the audience up to speed on the kind of ideas that you're pursuing out there in the real world. Do you want to give us an overview of what this system is? Exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing. Exactly.
Yeah, it's it was actually a fun project to do. The people at Whiteboard Animation were quite receptive to the overall theme. Of course, they get a lot of requests, and they're becoming quite popular. They've done whiteboard animations for quite a few major companies, but they enjoy when they get smaller entities that come across the block doing something like what we're doing, or nonprofits or something like that. And it was, of course, we are using the video for the Thunderclap campaign, but by itself, the video serves a very good informational purpose, as people can see. It has the funny bits to keep it a little bit lighthearted, because I think this subject of trying to change global agriculture and feeding people who are quite literally starving to death can be awfully heavy on the heart and soul. And so trying to approach it from a slightly different angle, I think, could resonate with people a little bit better. So that's what we've tried to do.
It is true that it is a very, very emotional area of culture. Have you ever seen, or are you familiar with the program Man v. Food?
Why does that sound familiar? It does sound familiar, but I don't.
Yeah, it's now been, as far as I know, it's been discontinued, but this was essentially what they call food pornography. A man goes around America, Adam Richman his name is, he goes around America and he tries to beat all of the all-you-can-eat challenges, you know, where they say eat 9 steaks in an hour and get a T-shirt. And one does wonder, and one is reminded when one sees a sort of an effort like yours, just how twisted we've become towards food in general.
Oh, yeah, we waste an awful lot. And that's kind of one of the reasons why CFS is trying to be more local production, local distribution of food. Kind of like what it says in the video, knowing your food is kind of a big deal. And, you know, we've gotten completely disconnected from the agricultural process. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that every person needs to be a farmer, because I think that's unrealistic to begin with, and people can do other things. But having a better connection with your food is important. And So that's part of what we're trying to do. And of course, the CFS concept has much more than just growing food, as alluded to with all the SusPlus benefits of composting and extra power generation and the other things that people can take advantage of.
Sure. I really like the idea of SusPlus, actually. Is that something you came up with yourself, or did you manage to get some inspiration from somewhere for that? Because I've never come across that before.
No, I made it up. I did get inspired to it. I mean, pretty much every idea somebody has is inspired by something. And so I happened to be at the second time I visited Switzerland for the Co-Initiatives of Change conference. There was a gentleman who basically said that sustainability is not enough. And I kind of scratched my head, and I was like, isn't that the whole point of the sustainability movement, is to be sustainable? But then he made a very valid point. And I kind of smacked myself upside the head going, duh, why didn't you think of this yourself? But what is it to be sustainable? It's basically to sustain, which is to flatline. Not going up, not going down, just sustaining. Well, can't we do better than that? Can't we do sustainability plus a little more? And that's what I was thinking in my head. I went, yeah, sustainability plus SusPlus. Hey, that rhymes. Boom.
Fantastic.
So then I just kind of made up the SusPlus concept.
It makes utter sense that gentleman would have put it that way, because, I mean, we always talk about transitioning from a growth economy. What we mean is transitioning from a monetary growth economy. There's no reason why we can't improve and outdo ourselves on the efficiency side for just technical reality.
Yeah,
so I think it's very sensible. And it's very nice as well, by the way, that you made it an open source, essentially an initiative that anybody can adopt with no copyright whatsoever.
Oh yeah, I hope a lot of people adopt the SusPlus philosophy. I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, for me, it's very similar to ISO things, or Lean Six Sigma is like one of the common ones in the corporate world and even in the engineering world. Lean Six Sigma is all. There's a whole classes on teaching people what it means to be Lean Six Sigma and stuff like that. And all I've done is in the similar idea. Nobody owns the term Lean Six Sigma. It's just something that companies strive for, and it does have a regulatory body. Right now, the SusPlus philosophy is just an idea. Maybe one day it'll take off into something that's, more formally managed. So if somebody calls themselves SusPlus, what does that mean? And, all that. But right now, I just think it's something that would be nice for people to strive for, is to not just be sustainable, but see what you can do to do bonuses, to give back a little bit more.
Absolutely. I call it reverse pollution as well, is the idea that you just essentially, as an entity, you as your byproduct is you randomly clean up and purify things that you didn't plan for. Very, very much the opposite of exactly what things like BP and Exxon do at the moment, where they accidentally ruin much more.
Oh, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why we were so happy to partner with the company Lake Savers, because they have 30-plus years of experience in restoring polluted water bodies, and a little bit of aquaponics as well. They kind of have dabbled in all the above. And so by working with them, some of the processes that they use, the natural processes that they've invented and developed over this, 3 decades or so of doing what they do, it not only cleans the water bodies, but it, helps internally inside the building, and it'll clean our own water internally. But, I mean, ideally, I would love to basically plug a CFS building into a polluted river or a polluted lake, and then over time, draw in the bad water, spit out the good water, and, after a reasonable amount of time, you clean that system. And oh, by the way, you're also growing food, and oh, by the way, you're making power, and oh, by the way, there's a chicken coop built into it, so you're getting chickens and you're getting eggs, and you're getting worms from the vermiculture, which feeds the fish and feeds the chickens. There's this whole symbiotic, complex relationship that's built into what we're trying to do out of a building.
So give me the elevator pitch for what aquaponics is, if you would, for anybody who's listening who doesn't quite know. Because and I don't know if you can as well. I'm sure you can explain the rough differences between aeroponics, hydroponics, and aquaponics. Would you do that?
Sure. To the best of my ability. Keep in mind that I am not a subject matter expert on the ponicses, as it were. That's why I have somebody on my team that is. But I know enough about them to know the difference. So aquaponics is, as far as I'm concerned, the most natural way to keep balance with how to grow food. You have fish tanks. Fish dirty the water, You run the dirty water to the plants suck the nutrients out of that. It happens to be a plant food. Then you run that that cleans the water, and then you run the clean water back to the fish. That's aquaponics in a nutshell. There's little microprocesses in the middle, but that alone could be an hour-long show, and I could bring my guy on board maybe one day for a radio show and have that discussion. But we've added extra elements to it because we want to try to make the building as self-sufficient as possible. Now, you are losing energy or you're losing nutrients through the plants themselves. So it's very much like the laws of thermodynamics. You're not going to get more out of it than what you put into it. But there are ways to minimize your losses as much as possible. And so that's why we have involved the chicken setup that we're going to do, which is something I had never originally thought of. In fact, the drawings, the CG animated drawings that I have, never incorporated that concept because I had never thought of it until a little while later when my aquaponics specialist says, hey, we should do this. And I'm like, holy crap. And then he told me why, and I never thought about that before. So that's why I try to remind people that the computer drawing, the CG model that we have is concept art. It's not laid out very well. It's not supposed to be. The building that you see in the cute little drawing is not the final product. It has way too many solar panels on it. It's overblown, but it's done in a way to where you can really see the fish tanks, you can really see the grow racks, you can see the pipes. It doesn't use the space very well, but that's okay. That's not the point. The point is to give the general public a fuzzy idea of what this is all about, which is exactly why on the website we say, keep in mind this is concept art. It's not final product art. And when it comes to the final product, we're going to have real pictures of that and real video of that anyway. So, if people want to see what the final product is going to be like, they're just going to have to hold on and wait for when we have the prototype built and we have our systems up and running. And then they can see all the little intricate details. As far as your question about hydroponics and aeroponics and stuff like that, hydroponics is very similar to aquaponics, except for the key difference is you use chemicals, you pour your nutrients in. Most of those chemical nutrients that you pour in to feed, to enrich the water, come from the petroleum industry. They're all derivatives of oil, basically. And I have no interest whatsoever in feeding the oil cartel any more than I have to. So that's one of the primary reasons we went with something that is quite renewable. Fish are going to breed, and if you say you're building up the right way, it depends on the scale and scope of the client, but there are aquaponics systems that use sturgeon, and from the sturgeon you get caviar. So there's
oh wow.
So there's caviar, there's a company that does aquaponics for some kind of foods and also makes caviar on the side and stuff like that from the sturgeon. So there's a lot of different ways. You don't have to use tilapia. It just so happens that tilapia is a relatively easy fish to use, and you can eat it. Not that the building is going to have a whole lot of fish as a byproduct. It's definitely going to grow more plant matter than it will have fish to deliver. So it's not really much of a food source on the same volume level. But that's why we decided, or that's one of the reasons why we have the chicken coop and stuff like that. You can have chickens and you can have eggs. There's different ways to get the proteins.
How entertaining that that somebody should choose sturgeon and caviar. Caviar, of course, gets its value from its scarcity, and how funny would it be if caviar became the most widely available fish food that there was?
That would be fun. And by the way, it's also growing plants and stuff to feed people.
Exactly. So you're killing two birds with one stone, two fish with one stone. So have you had the chance to pitch this to industry bigwigs? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, given the entrenched, crazy multi-conglomerate nature that food is, how have you found chasing funding, changing minds, and pitching in such a crowded and formalized and traditionalized industry?
Not as hard as one might think. We're currently working with an investment firm, and there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about because we're in the process of negotiating different things, but we've got a couple of project options that would fund our capability to do prototype development, and those negotiations are in place or are going on right now. We have interested investors from the Middle East. We have interested investors that are local in the U.S. They're eco-minded investors. They are out there, A lot of people think rich people are nothing but a bunch of nefarious, evil bastards with the, monopoly guy mustache going, ha 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 ha. And that's not always the case. We see a lot of that in the news, and of course you have your extremists who want to label everybody as evil that doesn't agree with them, even in the slightest. But the funding options are out there. Sadly, it takes a long time. You're talking about a decent chunk of change to get things rolling. I was really, really hoping that on Z-Day, when I delivered my presentation in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, that I would have a much bigger announcement than just the Thunderclap campaign. But that hasn't happened yet. So right now I've just got to sit on my hands and wait for the right time.
Yes, I remember I once very briefly worked for a company that had to attend the sort of clean tech trade shows. And one thing I noticed straight away is that any bank you talk to who's there to talk to the renewable energy companies really isn't there for the technology. They're there for the turnover.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a bank, of course. I mean, that's why a lot of people laughed when I said I had a meeting with Rabobank. And,
yes.
And this was back in December of last year when I went to speak at a second site conference. I also had a side meeting down in Rotterdam at Rabobank headquarters. And when people found out about that, they're like, oh, my God, they're only going to be after money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, duh, of course they are. They're a bank. It's naive to think that we're going to get something on a global scale to take off with no funding or without using the systems that are in place. And I, fundamentally disagree with this notion that you can abscond from the system completely and still get stuff done. No, you're not. You're going to get squashed by the bigger people that are using the system the right way, that'll just get it done bigger, better, and faster than you because they have the money behind them. So the smartest thing to do is to play the game with the intent of changing the game.
Yeah, that's been my larger point recently, because I think a lot of people don't take into account the fact that the kind of systems we're seeing now, the Internet of Things, the decentralized energy, decentralized food, very much like you're chasing, all these kinds of things. I mean, even things like 3D manufacturing, which I understand you also are incorporating as well. I think they do cumulatively within their own particular technologies have the seed to destroy the market that birthed them, because they produce a certain kind of decentralized nature. Now, we might be a little bit naive to think that that's going to go unnoticed, especially as we're already talking about it in public, and we're the least of the people who I'd imagine really understand this. However, I do think that if you follow through these particular kinds of technological approaches, you do end up actually making redundant a lot of the institutions way down the road, I would say, a lot of the institutional problems that we've had in the past. So, yeah, I'm on your side with that one, definitely.
Well, good.
I think there's a bit of both. There's a bit of both. Isn't there? I mean, some people love to do Earthships and stuff, and that's great. And some people love to opt out of the system. Yeah, that's great. That destroys GDP too. That's okay. But if we want to have a sensible infrastructure that's going to gird us up during the next very turbulent 20 years, some of that is going to require high-level funding from people who are actually of our mindset, who are now within the grasp of the levers we need pulled.
Absolutely.
Have you found people like that when you've been talking? Have you found people who are like almost with a nod and a wink and a nudge under the table, are like on your side? Yeah,
there's quite a few. It's like Switzerland is one of the meetings that I've gone to twice now, and there's some pretty significant people there, people who are in charge of banks, people who have been running institutions in industry for a while. They see the writing on the wall. They know what's coming. Probably not all of them, but the people that are going to places like the Initiatives of Change Conference and and stuff like that, who have this background in the old system, they understand that things are a-changing. And, it's very turbulent, and they're trying to somehow find this hybrid mix between profit and planet and people, because you've got that triple bottom line, which is the new thing, people, planet, profit, the 3 Ps. That's, I guess, a part of the transition process. That's a step along the path. We're not going to go from A to Z in 2 seconds. It's going to be all 26 letters of the alphabet in between. And it's going to be a little micro adjustment. It's almost like it's evolution in a way. It's a little micro adjustment here, a micro adjustment there, a micro adjustment here. For me, it's just a whittling process. It's like when anybody whittles a pipe, a really nice hand-carved wooden pipe. So that starts off as this ugly chunk of wood. And over time, whittling here, whittling there, carving here, trimming there, it turns into a very beautiful pipe. And that takes time, especially if you're doing anything by hand. So, and there's a value to that. And so the value that we're pushing is a shift in the global society mindset. And for me, it's a whittling process. It's a whittling off of the dependency on money. It's getting people less dependent on money to survive, which will give them more money for free time or whatever. They'll find another way to blow the cash that they've got. That's fine. That's part of the transition process too. But you get them less dependent on money for energy. Now they have either little or no electric bill. Now they have more money to spend on their family or whatever. And then do the same thing with water. Do the same thing with food. You start knocking out all the bio needs and then start hashing out the quality of life needs. Eventually, everything is going to line up. People are going to look at all that paper that they've got and go, what the F?
Yeah, that's true. It becomes
but
as
for me
useless
right now,
as those
the
material
focus
goods.
is quite simple. It's just trying to help people who are starving. That one CFS building will provide a 2,000 calorie diet. That's unrealistic given the scale that we're trying to do. If you package together 4, 5, or 6 buildings, maybe we could do that. But you've got to stagger crops if you want, adequate harvest rotations and things like that. But for me and for us, what we're doing as a team is trying to make sure that whatever we design lasts as long as possible, so that it just keeps doing what it does. It might just grow 4 different foods, have some chickens and some eggs, clean the lake, and provide some extra power to this small little village. And they'll still have to bring in maybe some extra food at first, but then later on drop another building. Or they find out a way to, now that they have a clean pond or whatever, they can do their own fish farming, and then they can sell the fish outside, which would bring in income, which then they could get more food and maybe get another building. And so it starts building over time.
But by the way, before we go any further, your campaign, your Thunderclap campaign, is still going. Do you have the link to it, or how people can find it, and what they can do, and when it's done, when it's over?
Absolutely. Right now, let me do a refresh. Right now, we are sitting at 289 people supported out of 100. So we originally started a lot of Thunderclap campaigns just default to 100, and then they get like 1,000% over supported or whatever. But we have 13 days left, so the end of the Thunderclap campaign is April 11th. And the Thunderclap campaign, Thunderclap is not crowdfunding. It's like crowd promotion, I guess you could say. People who sign up to support the Thunderclap campaign, which is thunderclap.it, and then you can search Cybernated Farm Systems. The actual link itself is kind of convoluted. It's like /projects/9645-cybernated-farm-systems. They don't exactly make it very user friendly for it to share to people. So what I just say is go to the thunderclap.it website and search Cybernated Farm Systems, and it'll pop right up. And then people can support what we're doing. It doesn't cost anything. It takes about 5 seconds to support with either your Twitter, Facebook, or Tumblr. And what that does is at the end of the campaign, we send out a message, a very simple message that everybody shares all at the exact same time. So we kind of politely, at your discretion, kidnap your account for half a second on that day and send out this massive message. And it just goes to everybody that's on their network and whatnot as a way to, in one loud bang, that's kind of why it's called Thunderclap, in one loud bang, everybody gets this social promotion message.
Yep, I've done it, and anybody who's listening who wants to see the cybernation of farm systems and the locality of food and this kind of stuff get really on the radar, I'd very much recommend you do it too. So on April 11th, you're going to be getting a message from me saying that this project exists. So I think it's very good. The first time I came across Thunderclap, it was for a similar idea, actually. It was for phone blocks, which you must have seen.
Yeah, they had they're like one of the most successful Thunderclaps that Thunderclap has ever had, I think.
Yeah. And it was actually before they even went live that they end up what I call clapping out. They were clapped out. They were on millions of %, basically, because people just found their site before they even launched, because I think they locked into something. For anybody who doesn't know, basically phone blocks behaves very much like how we wish phones would behave. Your battery breaks, you pull it out almost like a Lego block, basically. Or if you want, a Wi-Fi to be replaced, you essentially pull out the block that would be for Wi-Fi. Now, I've met people in the mobile industry who say, a lot of that stuff is integrated, but that's, of course, exactly the problem, and it can be done without that. And this idea has really, really caught on, and I think it actually made Thunderclap famous for that reason. So no, I think it looks like it's going really well. I mean, you've already hit the target, but we definitely want to get it out there much, much louder, because any effort towards abundance is a very good thing. And that actually brings me on to a question, Doug. How did you, as a former NASA worker, having done a systems engineering for them, how did you come across this particular technology next? Because it doesn't relate directly, does it? What sort of inspired you for that?
So how did I parlay my space geekery into a farm building? Well, of course, with the space shuttle program, which is where I worked with as a Boeing subcontractor in Houston, we dealt with nothing but systems. We were in an area called configuration management. So we dealt with the configuration of the payload bay for every mission, and all the blueprints and drawings and locations of every nut and bolt has a number. Every item, every tool bag, everything that goes up on the shuttle and down on the shuttle was coded. And we had to make sure that the blueprints lined up with the manifest. But not just that, we had to interface with mass properties to make sure that if anything was moved from one place to another over in Florida, that the mass properties people knew what was going on. So we had to flag them, so that they would then have to check and make sure that it didn't change the weight and balance and stuff like that of the shuttle for launch. And if it did, then you had to change where you put countermass or put weights in or take weights out. There's a whole big old process, and that can up to and include involving environmental control systems, ECS, mass properties, all these. We had all these departments in our wing of our building. So we'd walk over to people and say, hey, did you know this happened, and blah, 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 and you're going to get a message on it in a moment, but, here's what's going on now. Do you want to go do lunch? So it's basically kind of how we work. So it's all systems integration. And that's where my background was, is project management and systems integration. And so when the Haitian earthquake happened, back in 2010. At the time, I knew of and had been speaking with Dr. Kushnievis of the University of Southern California, who came up with the contour crafting concept of a robot that can build a house in 24 hours, a 2,000 square foot house in 24 hours. Basically, it's a giant 3D printer. A lot of people are now familiar with contour crafting, because that got made aware in the Zeitgeist Movement, and now it's kind of taken off in other realms too, and other people are trying to come up with their own versions of it outside of what Dr. K is working on. And I knew about that, and then when the Haitian earthquake happened, the first thing I noticed was just how destroyed the place was. The infrastructure was shot, and in my head, they started, all the political pundits, all the people are talking about sending money over, sending food over, then you get into the corruption and where's the money going and this and that and the other thing. And the first thing I thought is all you're doing is one-off solutions. You buy them a bunch of food and you drop it. That doesn't really fix their situation. You still have to keep buying more food and dropping it, which might be great for the company that's selling prepackaged MREs or food or whatever the case it is, but that sure as hell isn't going to help the people long term. And I thought something like contour crafting would help them long term. You drop a robot, crunch up the debris and the rubble and make a new concrete out of it and start crunching out houses. You can rebuild a neighborhood in a very short amount of time. And I thought, well, what else could you do that with? And I thought agriculture. Why can't you have a smart greenhouse that's off the grid, that does not depend on an infrastructure because the infrastructure is broken? So my first thought process for this whole concept was disaster relief. Tsunamis, earthquakes, things like that, where the area is just broken. Is there a way that you can do on-the-spot farming that would last a long time during the recovery effort, which can take years? So is there something you could put in place that would constantly grow food independent of the broken infrastructure? And by talking with some people in my office and I kind of bouncing some ideas, and I ended up learning about aquaponics because I wanted something that was sustainable so that you didn't have to keep buying chemicals to pour them in the water. Buy more chemicals, pour them in the water. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And that's when I researched and I learned about aquaponics. And I thought, here we go. Now you have fish tanks. The fish are going to reproduce, and you can probably, at the time I didn't really know enough, but I thought you can probably set up the tanks to where you can kind of fish farm a little bit, and they can sustain themselves. And then you have the plants. And now I just need to get in touch with an aquaponics specialist who can work with me on balancing all of that and automate it as much as possible using all the computer control systems and sensors and things like that. Fortunately, I did find that person, and that's who I'm working with now. And as soon as we have designs, preliminary designs and ideas on the board, so between my space shuttle background and grabbing the right people, I have a computer science, a computer engineer who's on board with the team. I have a CNC and machining specialist, so if we have to have anything custom machined that we can then make a blueprint of and try to 3D print it and make that as an option as well, so that people can print off their own parts or print off their own replacements in-house, like have a small, simple 3D printer in the building that really wouldn't cost that much. Then you create a system, back to systems engineering. That's kind of that's how I think about in terms of systems, putting all of that together to get the job done. And that's where CFS basically came from.
I like that as a background. That makes it very, very sensible. I remember seeing that Haitian earthquake as well. In fact, every time I see a massive disaster like that, and you see just the knee-jerk bullshit that the system prefers, send money, send what? Tinned goods. It's just amazing. They probably get thrown in the ocean.
Well, they taste like crap. I'd much rather have a big spinach farm at least, or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. But you really do see, once you understand what a solution would be, then it becomes laughable what our countries normally, or what we as individuals tend to want to offer. So it's an interesting insight. Now, you mentioned you might have had big news back in Rotterdam. Do you have a closer timeline of when you might have the big news?
I wish I could say yes, but no. And trust me, I'm on pins and needles just as much as everybody else is. I'm kind of at the mercy of the email chains and the conversations that are going on. I've had a couple of face-to-face meetings with people, and so we're just kind of getting through all the, it's all legal crap. It's mumbo-jumbo here and mumbo-jumbo there. But there's an option for maybe doing something with the Philippines as part of a deal that we're going to be working towards. So that would be neat, which kind of ties into Cambodia. When I recently did my trip to Cambodia, which was amazing. It was the first time I've ever really seen poverty on that level. You go to Phnom Penh and the city itself is one thing, but you just go 10 miles out and the shacks, the dirt roads, the dust, everybody wearing those medical masks, not because it's the end thing to do like Japan, but because it is just too damn dusty. And there's not a whole lot of paved roads or whatnot to keep all that down. And it's kind of dry right now. They're in their drier season. So it just gave me a different perspective on what we can do to help people or to provide something that's different. And what I loved about the Cambodian trip, well, let me back up a bit. How the hell did I get to Cambodia in the first place? Back in 2010, when I first went to Switzerland under the umbrella of the Venus Project at the time, I ended up meeting the former counselor to the King of Cambodia. His name is His Excellency Son Sobert. That it's his last name, first name. Sobert Son is how you would say it in the West. They actually flip their names around. They say their last name first. But I met him. Him and his father were very big in Cambodia post-Khmer Rouge, during the genocide and all the nasty, people can read the history books on how horrific that was.
Killing.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, a psychopath taking the essence of communism and driving it straight into the dirt. But totalitarian dictator crap is more like what it is. So you've got that whole country kind of rebuilding and trying to find its identity, and they import a lot of food and stuff like that. But I ended up meeting Mr. Son and not knowing who he was at the time, just describing my general idea of what CFS, what I was planning on, and he goes, I can see a lot of potential for this in Cambodia. Here's my card. And then when I looked at his card, I almost fell out of my chair, realizing kind of who I was talking to. And then I did further research and was like, wow, okay, that's a good contact to have. So earlier, towards the end of 2013, one of the things he mentioned, he's like, if you ever have the ability to visit Cambodia, let me know, and I'll set up some meetings for you with some people. And so, CFS had an investor that helped us fund my ability to travel as of late. For anybody who's been following, they probably know I've accumulated quite a few airline miles recently by going to Amsterdam in December, Croatia, then Abu Dhabi, then Cambodia, and then Amsterdam again. So, and that's just since December. So I've done 5 trips since December. Most of these to international agriculture conferences or academic conferences that are revolving around sustainability itself, or in this particular case to Cambodia. And I had some meetings with people and went out to an orphanage. And what I love is this orphanage, the director of the orphanage is someone who came from the orphanage. So he was a kid who grew up there and went away, got a degree, did some stuff. He's now married with his own kids and stuff like that. And he came back to help to run the organization for a little while and try to advance it because he wants to try and get it upgraded. And they see CFS systems as a fantastic way to integrate a major educational tool, which it absolutely would be, to teach the kids not just aquaponics and how to grow things, but technologies too, the computers, the solar panels, the wind turbines, the automated systems, the sensors, all of that stuff. How does all that work? So over the course of a child growing up in that orphanage, they're going to get a technical education and an agricultural education. And something that we're going to work towards is turning that, they have about 30 acres and a couple of retention ponds and stuff like that, to turn their area, their complex, into an agricultural research center to teach people how aquaponics works and using the CFS systems as a means to do that. And, of course, make food, which then the orphanage can use and sell to generate income so that they can improve the orphanage in different ways, getting better plumbing, better this, better that, basically working to improve the area better for the kids. And I can think of no better way for CFS to help than in something like that. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. And I received several formal letters of interest from their organization and a couple of other meetings that I had from organizations that are very keen on following our prototype development process. And that looks good to investors when you basically have customers lined up before you even have a product that's in front of their face. That's kind of a good thing. But of course, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. One of the things that, is first and foremost on the agenda is to build the prototype, not for the purpose of testing aquaponics, because aquaponics works. People are doing it all over the place. But to really build up the building concept itself of how everything's going to work, the automation, how it's going to be programmed, the operating manuals that will serve to teach the custodians of the building how to manage it and how it works, harvest cycles, what we can grow, maximizing the space efficiency of the building. And also, since CFS systems are going to be modular or customizable, we're going to look at with conveyor belts, without conveyor belts. Because you don't necessarily need to have conveyor belts that bring you the food. That's kind of a nice thing to have if you want to have a slightly bigger building. But it's not a necessity for, say, a rural village in Africa. They can still go up to the grow beds and pick them directly. So then we can fit more plants into the building and do a lot more. So there's different design concepts that we're going to test over the course of about 2 years of prototype development. That way, when we're done at the end of that cycle, we know without question that we have a robust, durable, long-lasting system that will serve various needs. It'll be very customer specific. What do they want grown, and where do they want the building? And then we'll go from there.
Fantastic, Douglas. It's great you get to travel so much, and it has been very noticeable on Facebook. Where are you off to next, by the way? Do you have any upcoming stops on your world tour?
My world tour. It's currently the next thing that I've been invited to present at is a conference in Japan. It's called let me bring that up actually, the Asian Conference on Sustainability, Energy, and the Environment. It's in Osaka in June. And so that's a trip that's coming up. I'm still not sure yet if I'm going to be able to attend that conference because our travel budget's getting really tight. So I've got to really pick and choose what we're going to go do. And, of course, with the things that I'm in negotiations with for possible prototype funding and stuff like that, if something like that occurs, my focus is going to shift drastically from traveling around to building the prototype.
Absolutely, I can imagine. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you want to mention about this project, or anything else? Where people can go to learn about this stuff? Throw out the website for it, definitely.
Sure. The website is cyberfarmsystems.com. On that website, you'll be able to see the video that we made, the whiteboard animation clip, and if people want to go to the Thunderclap campaign and share that would be fantastic. That would help out a lot just to build up that social awareness of who we are and what we're trying to do. And so that's really what we're focused on right now. And we do have a Facebook page, so people can follow that as well. If you just searched Cybernated Farm Systems on Facebook, you'd be able to find it. And so following that, we do all relevant updates there. We also have a CFS Twitter page. So we're definitely using all the social media outlets as a way to push information out there. Like when we went to the academic conference in Croatia, talked about how that was received. A lot of people were fascinated by the concept and then never thought of making a smart greenhouse, because you got building a smarter planet, right? You got the AT&T commercial, building a smarter planet. So smart grid, smart this, smart that, that's smart car, all these smart stuff is being thrown around. So I'm like, why not smart greenhouse? So and they'd never thought about that before, so that was nice. So those are some of the primary ways that people can follow what we're doing.
That's fantastic. Have you thought of doing a TEDx event or anything similar to that? If
one shows up, the funny thing about TED events is you have to be suggested, and then somebody will contact you. You can't really submit yourself. Other people have to submit you. And so if people ever wanted me to do a TED Talk, which I can definitely do, it's up to the masses to kind of push that forward and see what happens. That's really, I could submit myself, but that seems kind of narcissistic as far as I'm concerned. So if other people want to do it, they can.
Sure. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen, whoever's listening. If you want to see a TED or a TEDx, sort of independently organized TED event with Doug chatting about decentralized next generation food, now's the time to speak up. Douglas, thank you so much for coming on and explaining this to us. I urge everybody to have a look at the websites and the various platforms. I will stick several of these in the show notes for this show as well, so people can find them nice and easily. And thanks very much for coming on and showing us the future of farming.
Well, thank you. It's a piece of the puzzle. We don't answer everything as far as farming is concerned. There's a lot of different approaches that are going to be put in place, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So I appreciate you having me on.
Not a problem, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
My thanks again to Douglas for joining us and explaining aquaponics and cybernated farm systems. We will be back in a week or two with our usual programming, again discussing the various challenges that face us and how the scientific method and the scientific worldview, once applied correctly and once combined and I suppose married to a growing social awareness of our togetherness on this planet, that there are no borders, no boundaries, no flags, no countries, in fact just one planet hanging in the middle of all that black out there, that we better start behaving like we're in fact aboard a spaceship that does require resource management and that can provide a much stronger, healthier, happier, better life for all once we ditch the old paradigms of division and ownership and all of the concomitant effects and elements and attributes of life that we see at the moment. Please review our archive. Please review last week's April 1st show if you want to have a view of what happens when we have an amusing dig at our detractors and essentially troll ourselves. It's just for fun. But we will be back with our usual programming next week. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you all very soon.